Hello everyone, this is part 28 of What If Naruto was told about his Uzumaki genes early, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Naruto released a long breath as he sat down behind his desk. The last of the meetings had been long. But things had proceeded with good pace. Although tiring, he could be content with how discussions concluded. Of course, nothing groundbreaking was destined, but they still laid the groundwork. The cages had reminded him that he was not a cage, and that had irked him a bit, but at the same time, he had reminded them that they could not talk about the future of the elemental nations without him. He was the one who had even made the meeting possible in the first place. Still, his role within agreements between great nations had been greatly leveled down a bit. It was fine if things were moving like that. It was an affordable loss of political might to allow the cage to take the front pages. He would rule the shadows with great effect. If possible, this world would move according to his will. Certain events had to occur nevertheless. Besides, he'd never intended to play politics in the first place. Haku was there for that role, and even if the cages wanted to be supreme, given his position and the strength of the empire, Haku's position would only strengthen. With Haku, they could be okay, keeping the guard down, unlike it would be with him. His number 2 was kind, and anyone who dealt with him knew that. The office door slowly opened and Naoki walked in with Kurotsuki. Naruto couldn't help but think of the first time he met her. The young days he had spent roaming around the elemental nations with Jiraiya. She had come along. Jiraiya had urged the contact, but it was a fine meeting that opened doors for him. Though the first meeting was fruitful, everything else after that had just been dismissal. He had hoped for something better, but nothing had happened according to plan. Perhaps he had been thinking with his lustful appetite than the rational mind that had taken him so far. Naoki's face was masked with an expressionless look. His tone had no emotion at all as he spoke. The Chushikage wanted to see you, Your Majesty. Naruto waved his right hand. It is fine. I invited them. I expect them to come knocking on my door when there are issues. You're feeling rather high and mighty, Kurotsuki remarked with a snort as she stepped into the office. She sat in front of the Emperor's desk and stared at him. Naruto dismissed Naoki and then faced Kurotsuki. Well, I am the high and mighty Emperor. It is expected of me to behave as it fits my image. I must admit, acting all superior does not suit my taste. It just makes everything dull as people become afraid to speak their thoughts. Must be the result of playing a genin for Konoha for years when you were actually the emperor. Kurotsuki said. Maybe. Naruto said with a shrug. The things around us and the way we live eventually shape our minds. He paused for a moment before asking. What brings you before me? You tried to kill me, and I believe that you will do something like that in the future. It must be a problem for you that you failed in killing me. Kurotsuki said in a flat tone. Naruto rested his hands on his desk and leaned back slightly. He put on an amused look before responding. I indeed did fail. But that is not because I could not. There was just an element I did not account for. In any case, it is interesting that you have such thoughts and you didn't bring them up during the meeting. It is something worth holding on to now. Kurotsuki said. She went quiet, trying to get a read on the Emperor. There was nothing. He was just coldly staring with emptiness. It made her feel as if she was talking to a dead person. And of course I would have been stupid to bring it up during the meeting with the other cages when I know you were probably listening. You are doing well to hold on to your contempt for me. But that room was secret. If I can listen to your conversations, someone else can listen to my conversations. You cannot be too trustful even to your shinobi. Spies are everywhere, and it usually is the people close to you that stab you in the back. The Emperor said. You think I want to kill you? If I want to do it, you will die. There is nothing else to talk about. Not unless I can expose it to the other cages. From what I saw there, no one is going to tolerate anything wrong from you. I considered proposing to the other cages that I marry you just for them to get off my back with the Kazekage issue. If I had proposed that, I could have been free. If that happened, by principle you would have been forced to protect me, and no one would believe that you don't know anything if something does happen to me. As you said, it is the people close to you that stab you in the back. Naruto smiled. For someone who seemed to struggle with her unwarranted contempt for him, Kuretsuki seemed perfectly fine with him. Who knew she could think to this level? Would she even consider sharing a bed with him? People do the ridiculous at times. It would certainly be an interesting scenario, but one that Naruto could leave for the imagination. So, why have you decided against such a move? The only idea I can think of is that you'd have to kill yourself emotionally to please me. The Emperor said after a couple of moments of silence. I'd prefer torture than sharing a bed with you. Kuretsuki said with contempt. Naruto whistled. It is amazing how one can create an enemy out of a person. Your hatred towards me is real, but it is also unwarranted and irrational. No matter how much I look at it, I cannot find a tiny reason that compels me to understand it. Thus I think you're an irrational woman. At this stage, I have no interest in nursing your wounds or convincing you otherwise. The Emperor paused, watching a range of emotions pass through Kuretsuki's face. State your business and get out of my face. Irrational things are irksome before my sight. Kuretsuki snorted at the last part. You are to blame for all that has befallen to my village. You're being irrational and I will not say it again, woman. There was still ice in Naruto's tone. His eyes flashed with danger for a moment, causing Kuretsuki's senses to flare up with tension. Your village went to war with me because of your irrational fear. You also tried to kill me before. The more you continue with that nonsensical talk with me, the more your presence will become intolerable before me, and I won't have a problem in keeping you away from me for the rest of your miserable life. Kuretsuki wanted to shout. She wanted to glare at him and tell him that he could not speak to her in that manner. But the stern look on his face just dried up all the words in her throat and she was silent. It is difficult for me to hold grudges. And I don't have too many things that I dislike. Because of this, if it is reasonable, I will get along with anyone, regardless of moral values. I should hate you. It should be within me to desire to crush you and destroy you to the brink of extinction because you entered this village and laid siege to it. It was when I saw the result of irrational fear, the destruction to my home, a home that I was robbed by you people, I became very angry. While angry, I contemplated many things. In my anger, I sought only chaos and destruction, and it was possible. I could do it. But I did realize that the anger would not benefit my clan in any way. There was nothing to gain other than the corrupt thrill of vengeance. My eternal happiness would not come from wiping out those who drove my clan to the edge of extinction, but from seeing it rise again. It was then that I made the rational choice. If you want to speak to me, come to me with a purpose. You either want to see me dead or your village prosper. Naruto closed his eyes. Kuretsuki knew she was being dismissed from the office. But she didn't want to leave. Seeing him with eyes closed made her think of lunging at him. There wasn't even a sense of danger. He just looked open. But she knew it was the comfort that made her try to kill him and then fail miserably before being made a subject of torture methods by that sadistic woman. After a couple of moments, Kuretsuki stood up and walked away without saying a word to the Emperor. She didn't even speak to Naoki and Haku, who were standing outside. The former just led her out silently while Haku stepped inside the office. That was rather generous of you. I didn't think you'd be so kind to her, Haku said before settling on the couches. Naruto opened his eyes and glanced at Haku for a moment before responding. You think I was being kind? And, since when do you eavesdrop on my conversations? Naoki let me, Haku said with a shrug. Your words will get to her if she decides to digest them. And that will spare her from certain death. Seeing her contempt for you, it is quite simple to assume that you plan to have her murdered. Nothing sinister over that, Naruto said with nonchalance. I honestly don't care for her or what happens. I merely took a calculated decision. Calculated towards which conclusion? My satisfaction. You should know I am a very selfish person, Haku. Though I ordered for her death, I also allowed Yoshino to explore the idea of keeping her alive. Things at the meetings have led me to consider. If she doesn't fall in line, she suffers and eventually dies. But if she cooperates, Nagato won't pester me too much about the gap she creates within the 5 cages. Nagato, Haku said in thought. So we are going to bring him back. Yes, Naruto said. As my number 2, you will deal with Awagakure along with Yoshino. When one of the cages decides when to hold peace dialogues, you will lead and Yoshino will do the side talks. You will resolve the issue to my satisfaction. There are 2 ways things will go either way. The pressure will continue to be applied to keep her uncomfortable as possible. I don't think this will work out as much as it did with the water daimyo. Don't disappoint me, Haku. I trust your hopeful self. And it is that side of you that gives me reason to believe that even when I do not see a logical scenario, certain things can work. Sometimes reason fails you, and as a human, you can only hold on certain things even when it seems irrational. That from you, of all people. I will do whatever and change my mindset based on convenience. Haku shook his head. I hope you change soon, Naruto. Even if not soon, I truly hope that a day comes when you will actually care about people and moral values. Perhaps that should be my lifelong mission. The Emperor was sitting by the backyard. There was no sound of humans, just the sound of water running through the streams. It was something a bit normal. Shikamaru was not used to seeing Naruto sitting there, knee raised, body leaned against the wall, eyes staring into the empty space ahead. Even though the garden was beautiful and had a natural breath about it, it was obvious that Naruto was not absorbed by it. The Emperor had 2 bottles beside him. Another one seemed to have been consumed already as it was lying on the ground. The man who'd led them here had not said a word to them but just whispered to Naruto. There hadn't been any response from the Emperor. At least anything physical. Shikamaru settled down alongside Kakashi. He stared the garden with an empty look for a moment before speaking. I could get used to this, he said to Kakashi in a whisper. There was no one saying anything. It was just silent and peaceful. It provided the peace that he so often craved and still eluded him when he was in Konoha but had so much enjoyed when he was a child. Being an adult was truly hard work and troublesome. Had he known, he'd have wished to remain a child if that was possible. It suits you best, with being lazy, Kakashi said. Shikamaru smiled. No disrespect, but I don't think you're the one who can talk about being lazy. You are famous for your tardiness after all. Kakashi waved it off. That was when nothing was mandatory. But now, with new responsibilities, you get absorbed into things easily, he said before taking out his book. He then laid on his back. Maybe I can do some reading without anyone saying anything. Shikamaru shook his head and followed Kakashi's example. The air was fresh, a little bit cold. It truly felt like the compound was in a different space from the rest of the village. With the cages around, there was a lot occurring in the village, but he could not feel any of it. There was peace here. He closed his eyes and enjoyed the comfort. Kakashi slowly read a couple of pages while glancing towards the Emperor. It had been a couple of minutes already, but Naruto hadn't moved an inch. If anything, it seemed like they were not there to the man, but that Uzumaki had already warned him. Shikamaru was fast asleep. The peace had been a little too tempting. He would have dozed off as well if not for the excitement of the chapter he was reading. It was after an hour when Shikamaru started stirring and his eyes slowly opened. He yawned and stayed motionless for a couple of moments before getting up. Kakashi was still lying on his back, the eye smile clearly there, and the Emperor was now facing him, legs folded, a blank look on his face. The bottles seemed empty now. You're making yourself pretty comfortable in my home, Naruto said in a quiet tone. It is honestly relaxing here, and for a moment, you can forget about the troubles of being a shinobi. Shikamaru answered. He glanced at the garden for a moment before looking back at the Emperor. Aren't you doing the same? Naruto shook his head. I come here to think about certain issues. But you can say it is my place to feel alive. I cannot drink in the throne room, and I try not to while in the office. Unlike before, I cannot just walk into a bar and sit in a corner by myself and drink while observing people do about their business. Naruto answered. Shikamaru nodded but said nothing in response. Kakashi closed his book and got up. He did not look at the Emperor when he spoke. You haven't changed, he said of Naruto's behavior of sitting still for hours. Addictive tendencies tend to be hard to get away from. Besides, I don't hate this. It is only a pity that there are no high windows here. Well, I think that is for the best. It would have been a different picture when you come to see the Emperor and you find him away from his throne, sitting on the window frame. Kakashi said with an eye smile. Naruto did not share the smile, he just stared for a couple of moments before getting to it. I only have a couple of minutes left before I go for my next engagement with someone else, and I wish not to be late. You could have warned us. You seemed comfortable, Naruto said with indifference. Besides, when you are pressed for time, you won't run about in circles with me. Not that you would have tolerated it. Not that it would have stopped you from trying. Shikamaru smiled. But it was Kakashi who spoke. There was a dialogue we started with you regarding a proposed marriage to one of your children with that of someone from the Hyuga clan. We wanted to finalize that engagement. I don't necessarily have any bad feelings about it. But my concern would be if there will be an option for one to opt out of it. Under mutual consent, that can be arranged, Shikamaru said. I imagine you'll market this and make it in a way that any unilateral termination of the agreement would carry heavy political blows. Naruto said. Well, it would be good for the Leaf if we could do that. Besides, you already have 3 wives. Marrying one of your children should not be an issue. I cannot say, I don't have children yet. But, are you willing to speak to Hiashi to conclude the details? Yes, I will make an arrangement for that. Naruto said. It should be fruitful. I see the long-time benefit of this, so you don't have to worry about anything. Anything else? I understand this won't necessarily translate into a good relationship with Konoha but just with the Hyuga clan. Kakashi started. What will it take for the Leaf to have a good relationship with your empire? Who knows? Maybe it depends on whether I want to or not, or maybe when there is a reason we should. The Emperor said while standing up. Either way, anything can happen. Just make your case. He paused for a moment and then called. Naoki. The Uzumaki appeared in a flash. Show the future Hokage and his advisor the way out of the compound. Yes, Your Majesty. Before you leave, Shikamaru said. What is your plan with Sasuke? He is currently training heavily to get used to the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, but you gave out those eyes willingly. What is your end game? You don't do things without a reason, and that reason is always to your benefit. Naruto folded his hands across his back and responded while walking away. I'm sure your keen mind will think of something. You'll share it with me the next time you stand before me. And do tell Sasuke I wish he attains much strength from those eyes. What could the Emperor be planning? Sasuke had an intense one-sided rivalry with the Emperor before, and with newfound power, his ego could get a boost and he could challenge Naruto. Or maybe just do something. Shikamaru would need to speak to Sasuke about the issue, as the Emperor wasn't just going to play guessing games with him. It probably was nothing, and the man was only doing this for his amusement. You just could never know. But, what was certain was that Naruto did not do anything without a reason. In an extreme way, you could say he did nothing without a self-serving reason. I was beginning to think that you would not show up, Mei said in a quiet tone, looking up towards the Emperor, who had just walked into the living room inside his compound. And risk the displeasure of your face, Naruto said with a shake of his head. He settled on the same couch with Mei and then rolled over to rest his head on her lap. Mei looked down at him with a raised eyebrow. They'd never come this close before. There had always been a distance, but he just casually strolled through that barrier as if it was not even there. Then again, it had been something self-imposed. Still, they were treading on a territory they'd avoided, and at times when she was alone in her house, looked as if it would be beyond her reach. She smiled. He looked so human and normal. Was this how things were going to be? She shook her head. She was getting ahead of herself. Your wife is still living in this compound. Are you not afraid she is going to come and find you like this? As far as Mei was concerned, Karen didn't seem to appreciate her presence last time around. Karen is a child, but there is no need to worry. This isn't the living room I share with her. You call your wife a child? Mei asked with a raised eyebrow. Naruto closed his eyes and turned his head slightly before facing Mei. She smelled pleasant. His head felt comfortable. Perhaps he had been holding a little back. But he was tempted to touch her in places. She was truly a woman he desired. She was older, had plenty of experience with life. She understood the responsibility as a cage and would not need him to babysit or cry like a 5-year-old. Of course, there were certain things that came with women, but those were issues he could not complain about. How do I say it? She is prone to throw tantrums, and these days, things have not been that great. It is actually a bit troublesome. There doesn't seem to be that spark that was once there. Why? I assume the fact that I've married again and will again, and that bothers her greatly. She has often complained about it. These past nights I have also been sleeping elsewhere. Naruto answered. Mei was silent for a couple of moments. She shifted her right hand and ran it over his face for a second before placing it on his messy hair. Even you have normal relationship problems. Well, I am still a person. Should my relationships be abnormal? You don't care that much about people. You just reason. Naruto smiled. You make me sound like a bad person. It is true that I don't care about a lot of things, but that doesn't mean I cannot care about those close to me. Even if I care, it is just not going to stop me from doing anything I see as reasonable despite your protests. Perhaps that is what gives the impression that I don't care. In any case, we should not lose sight of what we wish to discuss. Talk. You are the man here, aren't you? Now you choose to play it like that. May smiled. I can't do the talking for you. Maybe sometimes we do lead men, but you still do your part. I want to hear you speak, your desire for me. Naruto shook his head. Women are such complex creatures. You like something and might give hints, but that won't stop you from screwing another person. And you can screw the person you want to kill. Don't men do it too? Murderous bastards. And usually when it is men, it is rape. The emperor paused for a moment, studying May's face. I must admit, facial looks are meaningless to me. It is not to say I cannot define beauty. There are women who are certainly appealing, and I have often found myself enticed and encouraged to say something. I do hear you have bedded your share of women. Never forced anyone and all were satisfied. If they were not, it wasn't my fault. Some people are just dead inside, and no matter what you do, you can't move them. Naruto said with indifference. I have honestly followed you for a number of years, even before Uzu made contact. Maybe it was because I admired your will, or just because you are a matured woman of strength. But snail speed has not been because I do not find you attractive in any way. You excite me and I've thought of getting behind you, but I'm not irrational and controlled by my urges. There is always timing about everything. You are not that convincing. Naruto smiled. I just admitted something I normally won't. So, now you're just being naughty. Naruto said. He motioned for May to lean down. When she did, he lifted his left hand and placed it behind her neck. I guess there is no more the need to hold back. He pulled her closer and captured her lips. They were soft, her mouth tasted sweet. Her smell seemed to get pulled into his nose as they kissed. Naruto realized, his eyes had yet to close. Perhaps it was the thing of kissing people who he thought could try to kill him. One eye had to remain open at all times. He finally closed his eyes and continued kissing her. After a couple of moments, May pulled away. She caught her breath before smiling. Your experience shows, she said with a sly smile. Anything less would be disappointing. Naruto said as he got up. May watched him slowly get up. He then stood in front of her before pulling her up, carrying her with both his hands. It was nothing special, but she felt her heart race. There was always something special about being carried like this. She smiled. Instead of mirroring her smile, Naruto dropped her on the couch. She yelped slightly when he fell on her. It was nothing painful. He just surprised her because it was sudden. He was atop of her, staring deep into her eyes. For the first time, May could read something from those eyes. It was the unmasked desire for her. It made her feel a chill down her spine with excitement. He suddenly frowned. What's wrong? She asked in a worried tone. The answer came through the entrance when Karen walked in and started speaking, hands folded across her chest. This must be a record for you. You usually don't take this long. Naruto did not move. Only his eyes shifted to the direction of Karen, and then he spoke. What do you want, Karen? I warned you I would be handling personal matters. Why are you interfering? I thought we should do a threesome. Naoki tells me that you thoroughly enjoyed it the last time you did with a couple of civilian girls in the Lightning Country. Karen said. We are going to share you anyway. Would it not be best to get to know each other better this way? I don't think it would be a good way to bond, but for the pleasure, I wouldn't be against the idea. Of course not, Karen said with sarcasm. That woman from the snow would probably jump to the opportunity. She is a pervert. I'd be surprised if she hasn't proposed the idea with one of her aides. By the way, how far are you in knocking her up? Karen, Naruto warned. I just came to let you know that I might be pregnant. Isn't it great news? She asked, but did not wait for a response. She simply turned around to leave, and Naruto did not stop her from leaving either. Naruto stayed still for a moment before getting off May. He sat up and stared towards where Karen had disappeared off in silence. What a way to ruin the moment, Naruto said after a couple of moments. May blinked and stared at him with an expressionless look on her face. Is that all you can say? What else could he say? Karen had issues and he needed to deal with them. But for now, it was not his priority. May was before him, and anything Karen wanted and had to say could be dealt with afterward, as long as it was not a situation of life and death. He could ignore this talk of being pregnant and deal with it at some point. Nothing was going to change in rushing after her or getting mad over her interruption. But she still needed to be dealt with. She could have given her message at an appropriate time, not when he was having a good moment with May. I told you already that Karen and I are not having a good time. Perhaps this has been done out of spite. It is not like she can get pregnant on her own. May said mildly. The circumstances in which it was said aside, should you not be happy that you are going to become a father? Yes, he should be happy. But this was not according to plan, and he didn't like being maneuvered in such a manner. I should be happy, but the way in which this has occurred bothers me greatly. Quite honestly, I'm honestly displeased that Karen would go this far. May could only assume that this was not something that was planned by Naruto, at least. Karen must have taken away all the protection just so she could fall pregnant. Any woman could do that. And some men with the means could get it done. It was a little amusing that a woman gets to be what has the emperor undone. But why would Karen go this far just to get pregnant? It was not like Naruto would have denied her a child, right? Why? Karen was not supposed to bear me my first child. That was supposed to be Princess Kiyuki. She knows that well. But I assume she has done this to get me to give her more attention and keep relevance. I have all but stripped her of all power as my wife within the empire. Why would you do something like that? She refused to play her role. It would not have made sense for her to enjoy privileges she has not earned. May shook her head and closed her eyes for a moment. This was a complicated situation, and it was only going to get worse than this. This was not what I wanted to deal with. Me neither, but we cannot control what other people decide to do. It is a bit unfortunate that things have happened this way. I will nevertheless deal a firm hand. Naruto said in a hardened tone. It cannot continue like this. You are not going to make her miscarry if she is indeed pregnant, are you? I'm not that heartless. Yoshino's tower. Yoshino couldn't help but smile seeing Haku walk into his office. This wasn't something that occurred that often. He always had to go to the Emperor's compound where Haku worked. Seeing the man here meant he wanted to say something of importance to him. Yoshino could only guess that it had something to do with a Wagakur. Other than anything else, there would be no need for Haku to descend from the high office to come to him. It makes me uncomfortable when you smile like that, Haku said without sitting down. He did not sit but walked towards the window behind Yoshino's desk and stood there, looking down at the village. Old habits die hard. You were thinking of plotting something sinister with me being here? Haku asked in a blank tone. Yoshino noted how unusual it was for Haku to speak in such a manner. The kind Yuki was usually speaking with emotion. This was not going to be one of those talks where there would back talk and some arguments about the merits of his intentions. He could argue. It wasn't like he feared any debate with anyone, and there was no shame in losing. Not at all, Yoshino said with a slight shrug of his right shoulder. I assume you came here regarding the Iwa issue and how we want to handle Kurotsuki. Yes, I understand Naruto has his reasons, but you don't want her to die, and I want to know why. It is not out of kindness but for some reason, and I want that reason. Yoshino leaned back in his chair and glanced at Haku through the corner of his eye. The tone he was using was sharp. He had certainly come here for answers. I am merely curious, and I might like her enough to suggest a marriage proposal. She is a beautiful woman, and marrying her would give me a chance to turn her. Why? Curiosity. I hold the final say in what happens between Kurotsuki and the Empire. You might be the leader of Uzumaki, but His Majesty can veto any decision you make if he so pleases. In his position, I can do that as well. It is true that I hold no value to the Uzumaki, and I honestly have no intention of holding any value. The clan does not control the empire. The same can be said about the empire, but who stands atop of it all? Yoshino put on an amused look before chuckling. After a moment he calmed down and then responded in a measured tone. Call it a project, if you like. But Kurotsuki's hatred is curious. I want to see what is in her head and see if I cannot break it down. And you are willing to tell her that you can work with her to topple the emperor as you also desire the throne. What makes you say that? She doesn't trust you and won't trust you easily. You will gain her trust by working on her contempt and then pouncing with your proposal. She will probably agree to it. Haku said before glancing at Yoshino's back for a moment. What happens when you have broken her? Whatever His Majesty desires. The atmosphere within the village was still as breathtaking as she remembered. There was always the sense of peace. A detachment from the corrupt breath of the shinobi world. It was always a wonder how the village managed to produce such an atmosphere. There were a couple of select areas that seemed disconnected from the reality you knew. It was a wonderful feeling. It was part of the package that made this village a wonderful place. A place you could truly rest and be less anxious about the struggle of life. Yugito could not say this was better than home. There was no place better than home. This was just unique and enjoyable. She was going to come back here once more to make this place her home. It had been the agreement. Darui had given her his thoughts, she'd accepted them. She had her reasons, but the first priority was always been Kumogakure. Not her happiness or life. But this was still a place she could not be miserable in. Not unless she decided it be so. She was walking at a leisurely pace, with the Emperor beside her along with Simui. The love the people showered to the Emperor was always something to envy. Cages did not get this much love. Then again, royals were not in the same class as cages. Don't admire this place too much, it is not going to be your home. Yugito snapped her eyes to face the Emperor. What is that supposed to mean? Where am I going? The agreement was not that she would come to Uzushiogakure. It may have been said that way, but what was in the agreement was that she would become a kunoiki of the empire. There was still the mandatory option of her to be on Kumo's service if she was requested to help, and Naruto could not say no. I heard there were big developments in the Sound. You are making your capital there. Are you also going to live there as well? Simui asked. Yes, Naruto said with a nod. Yugito will go there as well. Yugito frowned slightly. She would rather stay here, but it was not like she had any option to decide otherwise. You could have warned me, she said. Naruto shrugged. There would be no fun in that. He suddenly stopped walking and the two blondes stopped as well. Naori appeared behind him and then whispered. There is a situation, Your Majesty. Naruto nodded. Trouble is never too far away. He muttered. Ladies, I am going to have to leave you. Duty calls. What is happening? Yugito almost asked, but she realized he would not tell. He just disappeared from them without another word. I've been a jonin for a number of years now, and that man went in behind the Emperor without me knowing. Simui said with a slight shake of her head. This place is dangerous. It was already a meeting by the time Naruto entered the throne room. Yoshino, Haku and Yugao were talking while Naoki stood by the throne. He walked past the three without saying anything and went towards the throne. He settled slowly, folded his legs and rested his head on the palm of his right hand and stared down at the three. He still didn't say anything. Yugao could define the expression as the Emperor pose. He certainly looked like he meant business. The pressure he gave off was also not normal. She certainly could sense danger. It is good to see you again, Your Majesty. Yugao said in a quiet tone. It was not that she wanted to start it this way, but she felt compelled to start with those words. We have not had much contact since you departed for the Sound. I wish I would be seeing you under different circumstances, but it seems there is urgency here. Naruto responded. The urgency has passed, but circumstances have not. Yugao said. She wanted to remind him that she had not departed from this village, but he had shipped her off to the Sound. Then again, if she had not been there, she would not have been at the end of some interesting things within the Sound. In here, things would have been restricted, but in that country where she moved under the watch of Gurren, she at least had some mobility. Something has happened, come out with it. Earlier during the day, Gurren was attacked by clones possessing the Sharingan. I was not there, but by the time I got there, they had already fled the scene. It had been a curious case. The clones spoke in one and acted like Uchiha, but it was obvious that they were just clones. Someone was attacking the Empire, and it certainly had nothing to do with Akatsuki. This was a different matter, and Noroi had not been forthcoming with the details. If it happened earlier, why am I only hearing about it now? I cannot teleport and had to wait for someone to transport me. I also had to ensure that the Sound was safe, Yugao said in a hardened tone. Naruto was silent. He had been right to caution this new threat. No doubt it was the same person Kabuto had informed him about. But he could not link it with Kuretsuki, and he still needed more details. It was nevertheless troubling that there were clones parading around with the Sharingan. He'd thought he'd taken all the Sharingan out there and sealed them away. Gurren. How is she? She suffered some damage but she will live. Naruto nodded. Leave us, Yugao. You have already given the details to those two, yes. Yugao nodded but she did not turn to leave immediately. She was a little ticked off that he was dismissing her so he could deal with the situation in the country she now lived. She was not trusted but it should not surprise her. Or maybe that was not the case. She was certainly not one of them. After a couple of moments, she headed towards the exit. I presume Noroi has gone to look for more answers but I want Kabuto on this. This is his area and he is familiar with the person. Naruto said. Haku, you will leave for the sound and take over Gurren's work. Nothing can stop now. Not because of this person or because of Madara. I will prepare for my departure. Haku said. But things are getting dangerous. We did not account for an attack happening now. This is the shinobi world. If you blink, someone will stab you. You cannot afford to look elsewhere. You must always be watchful for the dangers. But it is indeed troubling that we get surprised like this. Naruto said in slow tone. Yoshino, you are not wanted in this. Keep out of it. Focus on Azu and the wave as we don't know what happens there. Haku, ensure that a message is sent to all for all to know that there is such a danger. You're accepting this a little easier. Yoshino said. You want me to shout with rage and rave about troublesome people. No, but this was something we did not anticipate or even think about it. That has to be the greatest worry. Naruto had always worked with things he predicted or even anticipated. There were surprises but one reacted quickly. This one was just out of the blue. And he was honestly disturbed. I have made peace with the fact that I am not a god but a mere human. I cannot know all. We should worry ourselves about the objective of this attack and then we can deal with it accordingly. It is admittedly coming at the worst possible time. For us perhaps, but for an enemy who knows about the Akatsuki and Madara, this is the perfect chance to attack. Haku said. His words brought silence in the room. The implications are heavy, Naruto admitted, but we cannot fold to our safe houses. We must still move out even when knowing that we might get attacked. I will appraise Kurotsuki about this and see how she reacts. Perhaps I may be able to get something out of her before she leaves. Do that, Naruto said with a nod. I will be waiting for your report. Haku, Naori will take you to the sound, and take Yugao with you. Yoshino didn't think that Kurotsuki had anything to do with the attack on Gurren. The Emperor didn't seem to think so either. If so, he would have removed the leniency and ordered her death. Of course, they could be wrong. Kunoichi were truly dangerous and they had a way of dealing things. They could smile while talking to you and then feed you poison. Kurotsuki had already lured the Emperor with seduction and then tried to stab him. She must have hated doing it but she tried to do it anyway. Thinking of dangerous women who operated like snakes, Yoshino came to think about Miyuki. That was his other problem and he had to find a way to deal with it. Everything was still under control but he would have to act soon before Naruto loses his patience and takes action. Since she was Uzumaki, she would not die easily. Naruto would not have a problem in letting her live as long as she can continue to bring forth children for the clan. He shook his head and knocked at Kurotsuki's hotel door. It was already late, but such was the time to move about because one was hidden by the shadows of the night. Her father opened the door and stared expressionlessly for a moment before speaking. How can we assist you? He demanded. Yoshino smiled. It did always amuse him when people turned to him with such looks. There was nothing they could do. It was a fruitless struggle and he enjoyed watching it. You can assist me by taking me to the Chushikage. I have something of importance to share with her. He could not add that it was something that determined whether she lived a long life or died soon. If she had anything to do with that attack, there was nothing he could do to stop her slow and painful death from occurring. Kitsuki stared. He didn't like seeing his daughter deal with shady characters. He knew this man was the leader of this village. He didn't want to cause any problems either but this man didn't give him any pleasant thought. After a minute, he hesitantly opened the door for Yoshino to step in. Thank you, Yoshino said with a smile. Kitsuki just wanted to wipe that smile off the man's face. It was as if he was mocking him, saying what took you so long. The man was even looking down at him. He hated this feeling of being made insignificant by an arrogant bastard. This was not a wagakur, he could only swallow hard and allow the man to pass. Kurotsuki was sitting on a single couch, holding a scroll. She looked so serious and focused. It was almost admirable. The Emperor hadn't been misled to admire her form. She was a beautiful woman. Her character just stained it all. Of course, humans could be changed. Yoshino didn't think it impossible that he could not frame Kuretsuki's mind differently. Hello, Kuretsuki, Yoshino started quietly, a gentle smile on his lips. You don't have a problem with me calling you that, do you? You can call me Yoshino. Kuretsuki looked up from her scroll and stared at the man. He was here again. No doubt with something in mind. Admittedly, some of his words had saved her ass during the back-to-back meetings. She would have screwed things up. That would imply we are equal. Not at all. Yoshino responded with a slight shake of his head. I do not mean to insinuate anything like that. I am merely trying to break the barriers that would stop us from talking in a friendly manner. You occupy a position higher than mine and I respect that. Kuretsuki stared. The man spoke smoothly. Even in the last time, he did not stutter. He was certainly unlike Naruto, who was sharp. The Emperor could be smooth. Her earlier interactions with him had proved that much. What can I do for you, Yoshino? You can permit me to take you out to see a different view of things. Of course, if you don't want to, we can speak here. But I just think this space is a little confined. Kuretsuki placed her scroll down and stared at Yoshino. She glanced at her father. He was shaking his head saying no. She turned back to Yoshino and kept staring at him. Where are you taking me? It's a surprise. I'm not fond of surprises. Yoshino smiled. I planned on taking you to Omegakure. I'm sure you've never been there and would like to see it. But we can sit here as you are not a fan of surprises, or we can go to my tower. There is usually a nice breeze at this time and you can get a better look of Uzumaki. The third option seems better. Then, shall we? Yoshino held out his right hand, waiting for Kuretsuki to take it. The Chushikage stared at it for a moment. This hand that wanted to help her stand could be the same hand that drives a kunai behind her. You could never be trustful of a shinobi. Snakes were everywhere and they would bite if given the opportunity. After a moment, she took the hand. It was surprisingly gentle. Are you a shinobi? She asked. You don't look like one and certainly don't feel like one. Yoshino did not respond immediately. He vanished along with Kuretsuki and they appeared atop of his tower. Kuretsuki looked around. The lights were in full force and in different colors. She closed her eyes and felt the cold breeze brushing against her skin. She wanted to cover herself, but after a moment, her body seemed to do away with the coldness. She opened her eyes when she felt Yoshino move. He was giving her his back as he took a couple of steps away and then laid on his back. She could still see the village lights when lying down. Kuretsuki followed along and settled gracefully beside the Uzumaki. It was then that Yoshino responded. Appearances can be deceiving. If you saw the Emperor on a normal day, you'd think he is harmless. I've already fallen for that trick before. Kuretsuki said bitterly. Yoshino smiled at this. He is full of surprises. And likes it that way. He said. I've known him since he was a child. I've watched him gradually change. Grow into what he has become today. He shook his head. I should not. Besides, that is not what I wanted to talk about. Kuretsuki felt like she was being baited, but she still could not help but bite. But I am curious. Maybe some other time. Yoshino said. How was everything? I can only tell from his side of the story. He sees things differently. I want to know from your side, did things go better than first hoped? Kuretsuki said. It could not have gone any better. Though, a meeting with your emperor did not go so well. She added in a bitter tone. Yoshino seemed to sympathize. His Majesty doesn't like dealing with people who refuse to see the truth or reason properly. Of course, that is always judged by what he sees as truth and reason. We have all been at the receiving end of some sharp biting. He glanced at Kuretsuki for a second before continuing. But you must have learned something from that meeting, yes. What would I have learned? That you can try to kill the man and he still wouldn't be angry at you if you had good reasons to do it. That is perhaps the flaw in him. He doesn't care about vengeance. If it makes sense, he will do it and he will get along with people who even try to kill him. You are missing the point that if it is convenient. Isn't it convenient now? Yoshino asked with a smile. The cages won't allow him to do what he likes, even his allies. He can't afford a war with the cages, so what is convenient now? Kuretsuki was becoming suspicious now. This man was giving her inside information. Why? Did he have some sort of an agenda? Certainly, there were varying decrees to how the villagers treated both him and the emperor. Inner problems. She didn't think so. Anything was possible. This man could even be working with the emperor now. They could have discussed this. Gurren was attacked by minions of someone we believe to be the same person who healed you. This attack occurred in the Sound Country while she was surveying an area she plans to build a town. Yoshino said. Kuretsuki frowned, then became tense when she realized just how dangerous the situation was. You think I had something to do with it? If we thought that, we would not be talking to you. His Majesty would have shared the information with the cages and they would have made things difficult. We think this was something else, but we do know you are connected to this person. I could reject even knowing that person or having been rescued by someone else. Kuretsuki said. A waste of time and breath. We know that your other hand has chakra that is different and cells of the Shodai Hokage. That is something that Konoha would have an interest in, and with what you already have with them I don't think they would really appreciate it. That sounds like a threat. Kuretsuki said in a hardened tone. Yoshino put on an amused look while shaking his head slightly. You are quick to assume that someone is threatening you. But I do not make a threat. I am merely stating what I know and how it can damage you. This intel is simply not because we wish to have this hold on you, but because we want to deal with this threat now that it has come to our doorsteps, and we would be very grateful if you could help us. Kuretsuki didn't like how they managed to come to this subject. She should have responded quickly before Yoshino could say anything. And she didn't know what she could say to divert this talk to another direction. She didn't think anything would work either way. Still, this was not a subject she wanted to have with this man. It had never come up with the emperor. With the way he spoke to her, you'd think he didn't know about this. How much do you know? How much are you willing to share? I don't know, I don't trust you. Neither do I. There was silence. It was not comfortable, nor was it tense. We all have issues, but I honestly don't know anything. She admitted bitterly. He merely helped me. Not that I had asked for the help anyway. I thought I was dead, and the next moment, I was lying somewhere and he came to me telling me what he had done to save me. From there, he teleported me back to Iwa. I cannot tell you the location of his hideout. The last thing he said to me was that he would come to collect his dues for saving my life. Yoshino frowned slightly. This was totally unexpected. He had not expected Kuretsuki to be this useless in this situation. Still, she did give him some information. Now he knew that this person knew teleportation jutsu. That was something they had to look out for. It could explain why the clones managed to avoid Noroi's senses. This is a little disappointing, but nothing I can't work with, Yoshino said with a sigh. I honestly thought you'd have much detail to tell me. If you were working with him to take down the Empire, I would even understand. But there is nothing of grand scale hidden here, just ignorance. I don't appreciate those words. I mean no offense, Yoshino said quietly. You are in a dangerous situation nevertheless. I am surprised that you'd tell me this. I work for the Emperor and you said he could be planning to kill you. Don't you think telling me this would give us a method of killing you and then blaming it on that person? I considered that, but I don't really have anything to lose now. And, you certainly want something from me. This is interesting, Yoshino said. Perhaps I want something from you. That is all just speculation now, and you took a major gamble. But I guess I can reward that gamble you took. So easily. Yoshino believed that when a bird had its wings clipped yet tried by all means to cling on to life, living down on the ground, it had to be rewarded. Kuretsuki had to be rewarded for her efforts. It was nothing to snort at. Naturally, he would not say that to her. You gave me a piece of information that will be useful in combating this threat. Of course, I understand that if we get rid of this threat, you will be the happiest and you'd thank us just for the fun of it. After all, we would not have done this for you but for ourselves. Yoshino explained lightly. You said I want something from you. I won't deny, but I won't say it is true either. But I want to create a door of communication between Azushio and Awagakur. This is away from the Empire. You'd go behind the Emperor? Kuretsuki asked with suspicion. Yoshino smiled. I told you that we all receive some sharp biting from him, I never said why. I have a tendency to take advantage in His Majesty's thinking to do things that are pleasant to me, knowing that I can simply present my case to him. Sometimes he accepts it and sometimes he rejects the reasoning and dishes stern lectures. And yet you are still here. Didn't I tell you? You can try to kill the man and he'd still work with you if it is convenient for him. The other issue here is that I am the head of the Uzumaki clan, a clan that His Majesty is bound to. I don't believe you. You don't have to, Yoshino said with a shrug. But it would be best if you believed it. Meanwhile, Naruto was not the least bit happy seeing Karen beside the dining table. He didn't have the appetite for food. He had avoided her the whole night before because he would have probably grabbed her by the throat and banged her against the wall. He should be happy that things were moving along and he was going to be a father, but Karen had gone and done things in a way that left him without any option but to simply just accept it. He had never hidden things from her that concerned their relationship. He'd always been open with her. She just did not accept certain things, but that was her own reasoning and he could do anything about it. He sat across and glanced at the food. It looked pleasant. She could cook delicious food when she was in the mood. Well, it was not that he needed someone to cook for him anyway. He hadn't grown up being a spoiled little child. He had grown up independently and cooked his meals from a tender age. I have often been tolerant of nonsense from even Yoshino and you to some extent, but this is not what I expected from you, Karen. Karen knew Naruto was not happy. She also knew he was not going to do anything. But knowing him, it did not give her the confidence to be arrogant and say something that would piss him off. I was going to be a mother one day. Should we not be happy that this happened sooner? I'm not carrying another man's child, I am carrying yours. And I did not take anything from you while you were sleeping. No, you released inside me. And this happened. Naruto stared for a moment before shaking his head. There is a matter of principle, Karen. You know me well enough. Are you just mad that I did this without even you suspecting it? Maybe a little of that. Naruto didn't deny it. You had told me you didn't want a child so soon. Why did you do this? You better give me a good reason because I am about to lose my patience with you. No, I have lost it and merely working on tolerance now, simply because you are my wife, a fellow Uzumaki, and a child we rescued. A child. That was what she was. Karen was a little mad. I am always going to be a child before your eyes, is that it? That is why you prefer those older women compared to me. You didn't even think twice before stripping me of all my power. I am a child before your eyes. That is because constantly act like one. I have been watching you. You have been rude to all women who come here. Naruto stopped himself from saying anything else. Why? To stay relevant, I see with the way things are going, I was going to stay in the shadows. If your first child came from Kyuki, she was going to spend much time with you and you would only come here for the pleasure. I also want to be loved, Naruto. You focus so much on your duties that you neglect my feelings. I am not like you. You are very considerate to the others, but not to me. I must always accept whatever you say. Anything and everything. She was shouting in anger. Naruto was not moved. He didn't even blink. But his words spoke a different volume. I will admit that I have not treated you equally, but I have always been under the assumption that you knew better and I have honestly expected more from you. You disappoint me at all ends. In any case, I am not without fault in your scheme. I will take responsibility and ensure that you are safe. However, you are not to do any research or leave this compound until you give birth. You can't be serious. You are making me a prisoner in my own home. I'm serious. And until you change your attitude, nothing will change, Naruto said sternly. I'm taking back Naoki. You don't need him. If you need protection, ask your clan. But to make up for my neglect, I will try to take care of you. And if you change, after birth, I will give you some of your roles. That will free up some time for me to be able to handle personal issues. He stood up and walked up to Karen. He stopped behind her and placed both his hands on her shoulders. He felt her tension the moment he touched her. So fragile. You can easily break. I wish not to break you, but I will break you, even if you are my wife, if you don't get your act together and start behaving in a way that pleases me. How did you get in here? Gurren demanded as Kabuto stepped into her room. Kabuto merely smiled, and put on an amused look seeing her condition. Her body was heavily bandaged, and she remained still on her bed. You should not worry about such minor details. Your concern should be on getting better. Given how ruthless the Emperor is, he might just decide to replace you here because you failed at your first attempt when there was an enemy. Gurren glared at Kabuto. She'd always hated him and never trusted him. There had always been competition. Maybe it had been one-sided, but that didn't mean she hated him any less. She had been happy when she escaped from Orochimaru, and now here he was working for the Emperor. It was maddening that he would follow her here. Gurren entertained the thought of strangling him to death. Kabuto was dangerous and she didn't want him anywhere near her. Did you come here to mock me? Are you going to ignore my statement? Don't play it like you are just being smart. You are saying that because you already know that someone has been sent to lead this country and it is who the Emperor chose that is more telling about the situation. Gurren said through gritted teeth. What do you want, Kabuto? I just came to check on my former comrade. We are still colleagues, although under different masters. That aside, I have been tasked with working on the intelligence side of things. And I am investigating your attack. The Emperor seems to trust my skills in such issues. Gurren frowned deeply. If that is all you came for, you can leave. And if you ever think of betraying the Emperor, I will hunt you down and kill you with my own hands. Kabuto chuckled lightly. He shifted his glasses before responding. It is quite impossible for me to betray the Emperor. But I am sure you will figure it soon enough. In any case, I have no such intentions. I am quite content with the protection I have and free movement I have to conduct my business. I gambled and it worked. I just realized that the Empire will eventually dictate the events within the shinobi world by controlling things from the shadows. I know the Emperor already has his hands on the daimyo of 4 of the 5 great nations. You really want to be on the winning side than on any other side. Of course, he has to win against Madara. You could have just gone after Madara. I'm certain that what Madara plans isn't going to leave me with room to do what I want. What they plan might be the end of the shinobi world. Although, I do think Zetsu has other intentions that are contradictory to what Madara has. I unfortunately realized it a little too late. But oh well, we will just have to see how things proceed. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.